Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our inaugural webinar organized by the Working Women's Roundtable. Working Women's Roundtable by Luminary Learning Solutions is an initiative designed to collectively look at options and solutions for questions and challenges faced by working women and support each other throughout our careers. If you are someone just starting out, or you have broken the proverbial glass ceiling and made it right to the top, and if you wish to be a part of this movement, feel free to register on the link we've shared on the chat box. All updates and conversations happen on LinkedIn, so join the group today. Membership and admission to all webinars and material are completely free of charge. As our first forum, today we are addressing an interesting, or rather an unspoken topic: working for a female boss. Is it really different? I invite you to ask pointed questions and learn as much as you can. Use the chat option below to share feedback and comments, and use the Q&A option to post your questions. We will answer all of them as much as we can. Now, let me introduce our eminent panel for today. We have with us Imani Perera, Head of Learning and Development, Keels Group; Niroza Gazalli, Chief Process Officer, Expolanka Freight Limited Headquarters; and Pulasthika Wirasinha, Head of HR, London Stock Exchange Group. And I'm Zafrana Nafis, spearheading Working Women's Roundtable and your host for today. Now, these wonderful ladies have been there and done that. Well-respected bosses in their organizations. So feel free to put them in trouble and ask difficult questions. Trust me, they'll be able to offer you advice to steer any kind of situation. Right, so when it comes to the topic of women in leadership, times have changed and so have attitudes. But still, there is a lot of myths and different opinions when it comes to working under a female boss. So let me start the discussion with that. Is working under a female boss really different? What is your opinion, and how do you see that? Shall we start with Pulasthika?
Sure. Thank you very much for the invitation, and welcome to everybody who signed up. So on the context of the conversation, I think we have two parties, right? On the conversation, a female boss or a leader who is doing the leading role, and everybody who reports into that person, who could be either gender, right? So you can be a male or a female who, reports into the person. So if you take the former, who's the manager, there are so many challenges I think that person has gone through because of the gender, good ones and I think also bad ones. So we come from possibly a very patriarchal community where, it's very masculine, feminine, we have that. So when we take it to office as well, there is a certain amount of personally, my experience has been when I started being a manager, because you are expected to have that nurturing, personality as a female, which other people expect. You are kind of expected to take the minutes in a meeting. You are, even though sometimes we don't realize that we are expected to, there is a certain expectation that was there. Secondly, then if you have a meeting and of course there is somebody who's looking after food, etc., you are naturally expected to see whether things are all doing well, or have you thought about it? Not that you need to go and get it done, but have you thought about it? If it was missed, possibly you're considered to be the first one to possibly would have thought about it. So likewise, some of those things are there, which we bring, I think, very culturally that we bring into it. And when we grow up the ladder, sometimes there is a lot of, we have to listen to all the baggage which comes with it, saying, oh, did she go up the ladder using her merit only? Was that the only thing that she used to go up the ladder, right? So personally, there's a lot of, guardrails that we've watched before we kind of got into as a female leader. I think some of this defines the first scope that I mentioned. Then when I think the second, the latter, whoever who reports into that person, is all about performance, right? It's all about, getting the job done. So these two coming together, I think there is a fine line in terms of understanding each other. That's possibly what it is, whether it's different genders or any other thing. That fine line of having a common purpose and a common delivery is possibly what it is. Maybe we could share more when the other two speakers also have spoken, as like maybe an opening comment. We could possibly share some more details in terms of personal experience.
Thank you, Pulasthika. That's an interesting way to start our conversation. Imani, do you want to share some thoughts on is it really different?
Yeah, so thank you once again for the invitation, and it's lovely to be here amongst everyone. As Pulasthika mentioned, yes, there is the whole sort of cultural facts that come into play, but I also think there is a culture within an organization that you are part of, and that also doesn't necessarily have to resonate with the external sort of factors of what makes a culture within the more macro level of things. So in that sense, it has a lot to do with an organizational culture and what it brings to defining how a woman leader can work with the people around her, etc. And yes, it has evolved through the years, and things have changed culturally, externally as well, and that has for organizations that are forward thinking, this has really helped in defining their cultures as well. And so for people who are fortunate to work in organizations that have that outlook, it is a very sort of a heartening experience to know that what you have experienced before, or in what might have been your experience some years ago, is not necessarily what you feel now. So I see that in terms of like how organizations have grown and how you as an individual. So for example, me in that second phase of what Pulasthika mentioned about, reporting into someone, as opposed to when you take up leadership, you have more opportunity to actually be that leader you want to be, because of the sort of certain cultural misnorms now being more people being more broad-minded, etc. So I think that is a very positive outlook that we are in at the moment, even in Sri Lanka, where yes, we have certain sort of factors that have been predominantly very vested in terms of what we have been grown up with. But even here we see now the dialogue on unconscious bias and things like that being really in the forefront of what people speak about. So then you don't have to really make too much an effort to convince, although you need to understand that there's still a lot to do, right? But I feel that it is a very good place to be in, because you are actually in the midst of having those conversations, right? And I completely agree with her point in terms of performance in the second phase of things, where yes, in terms of irrespective of what gender you're in, it is the performance. And when you are in an organization that embraces meritocracy, it ideally needs to sort of work in that sense, right? But as you know, personality is also coming to play. It's not to do with either gender or anything like that. It is in terms of personalities and how people look at things, and we are all human, and that is one of the things that we need to sort of work on. But yeah, so in that sense, if everything is as it is, it would be performance based when it comes to reporting into a female boss as well. But I'm sure we'll have more to talk about as we move on.
Thank you, Imani. So let's just hear from Niroza as well before we dive into the rest of the topics for today.
Yes, good evening, everyone, once again, and thanks, Zafrana, for this invitation. So taking your question, I think, yes, Pulasthika and Imani covered a lot of the areas that, I also agree with. I also like to add the maturity level of the, both parties to this. It depends on the maturity level, and how you understand your boss and your subordinate matters a lot. And it's a time-taking thing, it's not that, you can just understand somebody overnight. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. And if you have 100 people reporting to you, all 100 come from different backgrounds, and it's 100 ways of looking at things. So it depends on the maturity. So if your boss, a female boss, doesn't understand you, or if you don't understand your boss, definitely it's not going to be a healthy relationship. So I think we have to really look at, there's a lot to this is like a subject that we can really deep dive and get more and more information to where they come from, how they come from, and the health conditions, the age limits, the gender, all that. It's a very lengthy subject and a very broad area. But taking from Pulasthika and Imani, I think if you ask me a question whether there is a difference, my answer would be yes, because we are two different genders, and that's how we are born, created. So there are two different strength levels for a man and a woman, and there are different biological ways that we are growing up. So obviously there will be a difference, but I won't say it's a bad difference or a good difference, but there is a difference.
Interesting twist to it, Niroza. Thank you for that. So all three of you all thought in about the perception that it's there when it comes to female leaders. So there's also a perception and probably a fact that women could be sensitive and emotional, right? So like Niroza said, yes, the way we lead could be different, but being sensitive and emotional, does that have an effect on how we lead a team and how we make decisions? Is it based on emotions, or is it based on rationale, or what's the best way to actually make a decision?
Can I take that question?
Go ahead.
Yes. So I would say having emotions is a good thing. I see it as a very positive thing. So you're very human. You understand the person. If you don't have emotions, you're just going to be like a robo, and you will not be understanding your employee, your staff who's reporting to you. So if you have your emotions, but you need to have a balance on your emotions, because it's an organization. Organization should be treated as a person. You can't be emotional and being unfair to the organization. So you have to have your checks and balances right while having your emotions controlled. So any emotion can come to play. Like Pulasthika said, if we have a performance, measuring the performance, the work is managed with a proper mechanism. If you have your systems, your working environment clear, I'm sure we can have a very balanced environment of emotions and work environment. So what I say is this performance measuring or the deliverables should be very clearly lined out to your staff, and you should have that very transparently measured, so that you have a very direct, clear communication. I'm sure Imani and Pulasthika, who's coming from HR background, will be able to enlighten on this area better. But I personally know, whenever I had very clear performance measuring schemes and their KPIs, the deliverables were clear, I never had, situations where I couldn't resolve with my staff. So I think you have to have your emotions. I think emotions play a very key role, but you need to have a very clear understanding on what you're using, where you're using your emotions. So I'll let the other two ladies add on this.
Yeah, so if I'm just to add a little more on that, in terms of, I completely agree. Niroza said that emotions, there's nothing negative about emotions itself. It is, and emotions, there's the positives and the negatives of how you control your emotions, and that is what it is. And also I think what needs to be taken into play is, I think that stems from what Niroza said earlier in terms of maturity level, is when you the controlling factor comes in through your experience also. So it doesn't mean that you have failed if you at one time display emotions that you felt you could have controlled better, because you learn from that experience and you know to be more guarded at another point when you come across similar situations. Everything that you have, you may see someone having very good emotional intelligence and aspire to be like that person, not understanding that that person has gone through various experiences and has the scars from it, but has learned from that experience. And I think that is what's needed to be when you look at someone and feel, oh, this is what I want to be, or this is what I hope to be. You need to understand that. And I think when you bring that into your leadership, in terms of not seeing yourself as who you are today, but in terms of what got you here and the experiences that you have collectively taken into account, then you would understand why someone is displaying a certain emotion and what is bringing it about. And to a certain extent, then you can relate to it. But if it is something, see, what I think what's unique about humans and people in terms of our personalities is we can't relate to everyone at the same time in the same equation of things, right? Because I mean, there are experiences we can relate to, there are things that we can't. But it is having that open mind to understand and empathize that will get you to a great extent to relate to the situation. So you may not understand it in its full sense, but at least if you're open to it, you can get there in some way. So I think that is also something that really helps in terms of looking at how you lead, especially when it comes to emotions and controlling whatever you want to bring out.
Thank you, Imani. Pulasthika, so I'm just going to add you something more to your question. We've just got an interesting question adding to this from Amanda. So what she says is, as a female boss, not just the emotions, but it's expected to have great emotional intelligence and is expected a lot. How does this impact a female in a leadership role?
So on your previous question, right? So on the emotion, right? Let's just narrow it to emotion. I have personally been told by one of my mentors way when I started work, saying, most of you on the call knows I'm called Puli as well, right? So when they would say, Puli, whatever you do not cry. Okay. So when you change emotion, you're expected, if you're a female, your emotional reaction is you will cry. But if you're a male, you'll get angry. Okay, so having emotion in terms of behavior is very different from a perception point of view. So when you really work in, I think all industries are very challenging, but if you work in an environment which is fast paced, you need to make, decisions, you cannot agree. As a female boss, you are boss or leader, whoever who's, making decisions, you are angry. So sometimes your emotional reaction would be to cry, versus you will see a male just getting up from the meeting and going saying, I'll go for a walk and have water and come back, right? So I think what is important is when you say emotion, based on, all the panelists spoke about the personalities, the outcome, all of that. So we need to realize that when you say emotion, what is the behavior that is attached to the emotion, right? So if you report into a female versus if you report into a male, when a time, so all of us as people who want to make decisions want the best team to report into us, right? So you're as good as your team. So you want them to challenge you and you will push them to the edge to make sure that the greatest outcome comes. In that pushing, if you do not realize that pushing is not for you to have an emotional reaction as a male or a female, it's for that outcome. That's where it has to come into play. Emotional intelligence, for me, I think there's enormous amount of literature in terms of emotional intelligence, right? But what it really means is you need to understand and be intelligent about an emotion, which is not a tick box exercise, which is more self-realization, reflection. You really need to think about, if you're a female boss and you have all multiple genders reporting into you, you're approaching them consciously very, very differently, right? Because you know their reactions are going to be very, very different. This is the cricket season, right? The really bad cricket season. So when you open a conversation, you will naturally, open a conversation with one of your male colleagues with, how is cricket, useless, no, or whatever. And, you'll start that conversation. With a female, it'll possibly be about, how are you coping at home? How is childcare? It's very much about work from home, right? So you do your emotional connect with your teams, which the team ought to do the same with your supervisors or whoever your work colleagues are. I think more than anything, we just need to better understand the emotions of everybody, whether it's right or wrong. Maybe I've had done those mistakes, opening up conversations where somebody would say, cricket, what, who watches it, right? There goes that opening conversation. So, you do your homework. It's not right, but I think what matters is that you invest in somebody's emotion. When you are dealing with teams, it doesn't mean it only works upwards, it works downwards as well. So I think that's kind of like the bandwidth in terms of emotional intelligence for teams to work together.
I would just like to add to that. I mean, in terms of what she said about, how you approach someone and you strike up a conversation. When you go one layer deeper into it, you understand the person for who they are, right? So you might strike up that cricket conversation with one of your female colleagues because she's so into cricket, and you might find that you are swapping recipes with one of your male colleagues because he's the best foodie and the cook that you have around, right? So it's about how you have connected with individuals, right, rather than in terms of genders and this thing. It's that connection, and I think that's where the investment in making relationships work really come into play, because you really need to invest that time for that. And sometimes with the pace of things that are there, you may find that you might neglect it and find that at a rush of things, when, like Pulasthika mentioned, when there's stress and when there is sort of pressure, etc., these are the things that you can actually fall back to help you mitigate that sort of sort of manifesting in a way that might be negative, right? So I think investing in relationships and understanding is also something that really helps.
I'd like
Thank
to add
you, Imani.
something there.
Yes.
In addition, Zafrana, it's actually like what Imani said, investing on your staff or people who are reporting to you, especially knowing them is very important. Their emotions are very important for us to get their performance right, because the way they perform is directly related to their emotions. Because as quite rightly mentioned, just take the game of cricket, or for that matter, we have a lot of footballers in our office, right? So how the football is equally important as work. Sometimes if they don't get their time out for football practices, they will resign and go for football. I have people like that. I have so many reported their preference, the priority was sports. But at the same time, I know they are an asset to the organization. So I had to really understand their timing, working, how they work, what are their peak performance times, what are the times that I need to let them go for practices. All that was very essential when I wanted to take the best out of them. So sometimes, understanding them, their emotions, what are their preferences, even to that matter, their sleeping times sometimes matters, because I had a lot of youngsters reporting to me in the beginning, in the I come from the freight logistics industry, for those who don't know. So a lot of boys who are just after school, their time management was very bad. But then with my experience, I knew their energy levels, what I could get the best out of them, how I could get the best out of them. So I had to really understand their lifestyle to get the best. So I had to even introduce sometimes rosters. Our reporting time is 8:30, but then I had to allow some people to come at 9:30. It's okay. because they work till 7:30, 8:30, 9:30, and logistics is that, right? It's a 24/7 operation. So you have to really understand how their lifestyle, their emotions, what are their preferences, when you're to understand the other gender. Just a little input on a very practical sense.
Yes, Neeraj, I think all of us, I think, agreed and spoke about the boss's side of the story, how we should emotionally understand, connect with the staff. And even Pulasthika said, even it's okay to cry. I mean, that's also a part of the emotion. Now let's talk of the other side of the coin, the ones who are reporting for a female boss, right? So if you were reporting or if you're under a male boss, and let's say he shouted at you, and if you cry, it would look completely normal because that's a female showing their emotion. But if you're under a female boss and she yells or shouts at you, would you navigate that situation differently? Or being a female yourself, how should you respond to it when you're being yelled at or shouted at by your boss? How does that play then? Mani, Niroza, would you like to go for it?
Yeah, so I mean, I think it is irrespective of it's your emotion, right? No, that comes into play. It is okay, someone who is sort of fueling it or something like that, but it is ultimately you who control the situation to see if at that point you feel like you need to cry, you will cry, right? If you feel that you need to sort of get up and go off, or you don't want to talk, you feel that there's no point in carrying this conversation any further, you will do that, right? You may I think there is a situation of, like, sometimes in hindsight you might think, okay, this didn't work so well with her the last time, or I mean, there was he didn't take it up that well the previous time that happened, or I was close to tearing or something like that. So then you would know and understand, right? But it is at that point when if it is the first time that you've come up to this situation, and you know that it is going to result in you sort of crying or shouting or whatever it is that you bring out. Because see, it's not just crying, right? There are people, even ladies, and who will sort of sort of express themselves in different ways, right? So that is why I think you need to be just you will learn from your experiences in terms of how you will handle each situation and each person. Because see, there are people who will be understanding of it, and who will it won't matter to them, because they would be like, okay, obviously this person is now emotional, in terms of it's good that that person expressed their emotions, and I'm happy that they did that because I understand the situation. And if they look at it in that sense, they're able to progress from it. But if they see it only as tears or as shouts or as clamming up, etc., then it's difficult to progress. So I think it's you ultimately who have a control on it. And I mean, I'd like to hear what the other ladies also have to say on it.
What if it was a boy, and if the boy starts crying, how would you respond to it? Will it be any different?
I don't really, yeah,
Mine.
Niroza can take on that. I think she has a vast experience on it, but I mean, from my experience, I don't see it as anything different, because I see it as someone expressing their emotion, and that's the way that they're expressing it. So, so for me, that's how I look at it. But Niroza, with her ample experience, can add to it.
I think I have faced many situations where, not just young boys, even men of about 40, 45 sitting and crying in front of me. And I never took it as a, as a bad thing. As Imani said, it's letting their emotions out. Sometimes you can cry in front of someone whom you're comfortable with. You can't just cry in front of anybody. True. Right? You will only cry in front of someone you're very comfortable with. So I have had a lot of times where I just sit and listen to them, because as you know, when you're leading, obviously you have to have a lot of patience to listen. this is something that, you have to have time to give them. So just my experience, when I realized that my staff needed more face time with me, I go to work early, I finish my work, and by the time they come, I have time for them. That's generally my management style. And that's where I actually caught up with my staff a lot. Those who come early just walk into my office and they take time to talk, their experience, their difficulties, their problems, their work related situations, whatever. That's a very free time morning. You have a lot of time for your staff. So likewise, just getting back to the subject, I think there's so many who cry in front of you, but I don't think it's wrong. You must let them put out their emotions, and that situation has made me to understand them better. The other side of them. We always see only the working side, what the time they come, the performance, the work, the errors they make. We look at only that. But only when they cry, the human side, their actual problem, their emotions, what a lot they carry. And then you try to understand and adjust yourself to understand them better. So I think it's a good thing that if someone can put out their emotions, we should let them do that. In fact, I have a box of tissues next to me, and I always keep it in front of me when they start, so they are comfortable and I don't have to. This is my personal experience. I'm telling you, it has happened many times, and you just let them talk, and then after that they become really close to you. Then you can even work. But you need to know your arm's length. If you become very personal, you will not be able to get some of the office related work. So that understanding, you should know where to draw the line, when to and when not to. But I think I have been very comfortable, listening to this sort of things from the other gender.
Pulasthika, what do you think? Any tips for females working under a female boss if you're being yelled at or shouted at? Knowing, understanding the emotion of the other side, that it's also a female, you also having the emotions heightened, how would you suggest them to respond or navigate the situation?
I think it's very unfortunate if you belong to a shouting culture organization. Okay, so but the first problem is that you cannot, accommodate shouting. I think there is many ways to get a really good output by not shouting. But sometimes I have had male or female bosses who can feel like a very, very aggressive male. When you read it, I'm thinking, is he or she scolding me? Or, you read it 3 times to figure out what this is. And when you go home, you think, oh my God, I've got really blasted on that mail, because you digest it a bit later. But you can really get somebody to work, and having a shouting culture is really bad. And then everyone in this call should work really hard to make sure that kind of culture is not in your organization. But unfortunately, if you do have it, I think when emotions are very high for whatever reason, that is really not the time to address it. But you really need to be the one who's on the other side, however difficult it is, to be the calm person, but effectively communicate and say, raising your voice at me is not appreciated, because everybody is doing a job, right? You can't treat people as if, it's somebody's son, daughter, whoever. You can't treat people like that. So you have to say that you don't appreciate the fact that you raise your voice at me. Maybe I have not, done something to your expectation. However, let's take a moment. I'll go out. You go do whatever you think want to be done, and I'll come back. There's always the power dynamics, right? You may not be able to convey what you want to convey when you're supervisor. There's still the supervisory dynamics is there. But best option is in that moment when things are at the height of not being, the outcome is not to resolve, it's just to shout. So in that context, walk away is possibly the answer. And it's not only for this kind of relationship where it's supervisor and direct report. I'm not qualified to give advice on any other relationships, but for any relationship, for resolution, I think when the emotions are high is not the time, right? If you want to come out with a better solution, fine, sit it out and calm down. And if you're in that environment where you can't reach that point very fast, I think just walk away would be the first reaction. But walk away with a follow-up where you can pick up the conversation again. Don't give silent treatment. Don't be a coward not to pick up the conversation. You're entitled as a direct report or a boss or whoever, you're entitled to, say your piece, and don't be shy to do that. But you need to know your work. You do not go in for a conversation when if somebody who's detail oriented, structured, outcome driven asks you questions in terms of how did you arrive at this, what is your recommendation, how soon can we do it, what are the challenges, you need to have your answers. When you're confident that you're somebody who can contribute like that, you have to pick up the conversation and close it. But maybe not the right time. So if you walk away or the person says, please, I can't talk to you right now, I'm too angry or something, and, shuts it down, follow it up with a mail after 2 hours or something saying, sorry, this is something we had to do, but we couldn't, but I would like to have this time to come and do it. And here are the documents that will help us start the conversation. You do the follow-up and you open a conversation to finish it. So those are some of the possible things that we can do.
Thank you, Pulasthika. I'm sure all of those tips would be really helpful because as much as we don't want to be in situations where you're yelled at or shouted at, unfortunately, many are many are facing similar situations on a day-to-day basis. So I think, like you said, the best way is to not get on at that moment, to, probably take it on in a different forum, or just walk out if you are unable to control that, but not go into a rant of shouting and get into really bad situations. So since we're talking about engagement, so in many reports say that the more you're engaged, whether you're a male or a female, the more you're engaged with your team, the more productive the team would be, right? So, and that's why probably if you're working under a male, and if you're a male, you'd probably go out for a drink after work, right? But if you're a female working under a female boss, then how do you engage outside the confinement of work? Or is it even necessary to do that? How do you look at this engagement with your team? I like to hear from both sides of it. Being a boss, how can you drive that engagement? And being a female subordinate working under a female boss, how can they initiate and have that engagement to be a more productive team?
I think it's, let me take that question first. I think it's not a very difficult thing. You really don't have to go out for a drink to, keep yourself engaged with your staff. As I said, in my previous, when I was answering the previous conversation also, it's about how much time you spend, how much time you invest on your colleagues. So if you, whether it's a peer or a boss or your person who's reporting to you, it's the same. How much time you invest to understand and then get to know them better. So in my experience, I've had a few, females reporting to me, and then it's about the conversation, you take, like their interests. What are their interests and how can we support and encourage them in their interests? So sometimes I have, who want to walk up in the career ladder, they will need some, motivation, support, encouragement, maybe to find some outside, connections to get their experiences. So how you engage doesn't really have to be over a drink. For me, it's even having lunch in the lunchroom. You can just pick up a conversation and start getting to know them. So I didn't find it very difficult to work with females. It's about your patience and listening quality, how you improve that engagement and understanding with them. And then also their grievances. A lot of females, I think this traditional pressure coming from home, though they are working, they are actually not comfortable working. Their home front, their children, their families, in-laws, all that pressure is there. So when they come to office, they have another female who's bossing you. So, it's not easy for them. They have a mother-in-law at home. Probably they have had mother, then the mother-in-law, then some sisters, then some sister-in-laws, and then you come to office, you have another, boss. So it's too much of female pressure sometimes for them. So if you are the person who's listening to all that, whatever their grievances, I think it's a good way of engaging yourself, and your experience help them to resolve one by one. You know, if they are having problems, you must help them to resolve their problems one by one. So I think I have been successful in having female relationships by helping them to, you know, resolve their burning issues. I'll leave it to the other ladies to add.
I think as I think everybody in this call who has teams reporting into them or has to work with peers or project managers who need to get things done from other people, it's a conscious thing, right? Every engagement activity that we do or any leading teams or anything that we do, it's a very conscious thing. All of us could have very dynamic teams. So some like bowling, some like drinks, some like hiking, some like all of that, right? You have the cocktail of every personality in your team. So I have endeavored all sorts of things for the sake of the team, right? So you have to say, Pulasthika, shall we do this? Okay, fine, let's do that, right? Shall we do this? Shall we do that? So I think team dynamics in terms of bringing the best out of people and where people feel belonged in a team is important. And it works both ways. So as maybe supervisors, way before, I think all of us didn't just suddenly become a supervisor, right? We definitely came through the grassroots and did, you know, the work that was necessary, etc. So we don't know it all. Definitely, we don't know what the right combination is. We are testing on a daily basis. Some work, some don't work. But for that, you know, combination of engagement, what is necessary is, I think it's important. Give me a second. I have a visitor. Hold on. And see you.
Imani, do you want to pick up from where Pulasthika left?
Yeah, let me just add to that. Yeah. So in terms of, I think Pulasthika brought in a valid point in terms of the different types of things. It's not even to do with gender, but in terms of age and even terms of like, you know, tenure. Some people who are new are trying to suss the environment, right? So then it is like you feel like, okay, you need to have something to get everyone together to get to know each other, right? And that is what you will have. So there you might just have something like a breakfast brought into office so that everyone just sits around it, right? And then you would have, like she mentioned, you know, you would have, because people want to, like, you know, really experience something and they want to go out and experience it. That's the other thing. But being there, I think, is one of the most important things. So irrespective of whether it's through text messages, through WhatsApp, through you know, connecting with people on a one-on-one basis, at even at any time, obviously people are free to come and talk to you, but putting it down on the calendar also makes a huge impact, I think, because there you are consciously telling people, I am giving you this time, irrespective of what happens, I'm giving you this time. And sometimes something happens and we all get caught up with certain things that fly our way, but then rescheduling it and showing that there is that time still is important, because that gives that level of engagement in terms of, you know, so I mean, some of the conversations I have on a one-on-one basis is, I mean, I try to steer it as far away from the work dialogue that we have, to just understanding, you know, how are things. It's I mean, tell me a little bit about what you're doing in terms, if it is something that I'm not very privy to, like, you know, just in terms of, I saw this, what does this mean, like sort of that sort of a conversation, right? So that then you get to know more insight about you know, just themselves as individuals, and that really helps. So then through that you understand that, you know, someone's just writing a book, or someone has, you know, just launched some new sort of entrepreneurial venture, and, you know, all those things are things that make you sure that, you know, you are there. So I think that's important.
True.
Pulasthika, go ahead. I just
Sorry, so many people to look after. So what I wanted to say was on your original conversation about if you have a male and a female, you know, boss that you report into, and if their agendas are very different, I think it's the other way around also. We have, I think some of the participants have been part of possibly teams that I've been part of. if you have a lot of females, our conversations are very different, right? So we'll talk about, the makeup, the boys, the, literature we read and all of that. The boys' conversations would be very different. But still, there is always a lot of fine ground that all these people find. I think as managers, where you need to do the role is to make sure that you include all of them in their conversations. In one of the recent conversations, I've heard a global leader speak and say that person didn't want to have children and it was a personal choice and very happy with, not having children. But the person said in her colleagues and the teams, when they talk about their children, about online schools and, how difficult it is, her boss always includes her into the conversation, right? Even though that it was a personal choice and very happy with the choice not to have children. So that kind of emotional connect and that kind of consideration, we feel engagement is just going out and doing something. It's actually not. It's a lot far more broader than that. So I think as managers, and all of you in the call, if you're a manager or reporting into any gender, if your manager is putting that kind of investment emotionally to include everybody in what is important for them, I think that's great. And if it's not, I think you have ample opportunity to navigate your, boss into that direction, saying, we've done 3 times drinks, we've done 5 times bowling, why don't we go and plant some trees now? Or, some different things. So you also have a role to play in this whole engagement agenda. So
yeah, we have an interesting question also on that. I think any one of you can handle and answer it, and then we could go into our next topic. So how would you handle a typical boys club culture, which is very strong in some top organizations as a female boss? I think whether it's a female boss or a subordinate, if it's a typical boys club culture, how do you handle? That's the question.
Okay, so
go ahead, please.
just so I would think, I mean, it is see, people will you can't really change everyone, and what they want to do they'll do. And you also can say these are things that you prefer not to be part of. But if you don't want to even say it, sometimes you just don't have to turn up, right? So that's one way you can look at it. And the other thing is, you being there doesn't necessarily mean that you have to partake in everything in the same intensity that everyone is. If there's something that makes you uncomfortable, you can say so. You can move away from it and not be engaged in that in the same intensity. And also, and I think if you do communicate to a great extent, it is it's understood, right? Because if what happens is, if you don't communicate and you think, oh, this is the culture and I need to be part of it because it is the culture, then it is what you bring into the equation, right? So I think it's a matter of you sitting there and thinking that, or it is taking it up to, taking the ownership on it in terms of what you need to do, and then moving on. So I really look at it in that sense, irrespective of, what is it? Because, someone can say that there is a sort of a sisterhood in some things where, people, so irrespective of what is happening, if people are not really comfortable in it, they can just say, okay, this is not my thing, I'll catch you later or something, and move on, because no one's really compelling anyone to be there. And that shouldn't be the case if it is an organization that looks at it with an open mind. Niroza, go ahead, please.
Precisely my point too. That was exactly what I wanted to say, because I have faced it in many times. I have been with many males around, and I have had to go to clubs, bars, pubs, and I don't drink. But they never felt uncomfortable me being around. No, I felt uncomfortable me being around with them too. It all depends on how you manage your situation. How firm are you with your own beliefs and how you manage your own, situation. So being around them is not bad. At the same time, you should know your limits. So it's a very balanced situation. You have to strike a balance between both. As Imani said, if you don't like something, you should have the courage to say, look here, this is not my time. This is not the thing that I would want to participate. So it's up to you to choose what is good and what is bad, and what is for you and what is not for you. And it should not be a situation where it is interrupting or obstructing your work. It's nothing to do with work. Your performance should not be based on whether you're part of the boys club or not.
Interesting thoughts, Niroza. Thank you for both of you. Now I'm getting into a very interesting topic that you might even not agree. So, but this is something that came up a lot when we started saying that this is going to be the topic for today. So there's this interesting term called queen bee syndrome, right? So which says that when a woman is in a position of authority, they treat their subordinates more critically if they are a female, right? So generally, it's perceived that female bosses are, bit more rude or, are more critical to their female subordinates. Is there a truth in it? If so, why does it happen? So I'll ask both sides of the question at once so you can answer it. Is it there? Why is it happening? And if a female is facing such situation where you can see that you're being ill-treated, how can they handle it? Any tips? There's two questions.
Shall I go first?
Yes, Pulasthika.
So, sorry, I've not heard about the queen bee syndrome. I'm just going by your definition. If it's happening, I don't want to say it's not happening. It could be happening, right? If it's happening, it could be for a reason, because to get to that leadership position, I think there's a lot of performance that needs to have happened. You have a lot of showcasing of merit that you need to do, and it's the same for both genders. I don't think it's only for females. But if you got there, I think if you're very critical about the females, it's possibly because you want them to succeed a bit better. And I don't think it's discriminating performance standards for male and female. It could be because you want that person to perform better, go up faster. If you look at the statistics, there's a lot of work that has been done on male female, right, at work. And Business Week has said the women has the right stuff. The might versus mental health, all of that. So women has got the attention that women need, and it's come to a very embarrassing point now. The moment we do something great, we're only seen as a female, nothing else, right? So it's now parking on embarrassment about your gender, not your merit. Having said that, it has been a long journey, I think, to get to where we've come, and especially in Sri Lanka. Because of that, there could be an expectation through nurturing that, we want you to succeed. We want you to be that better statistic in terms of becoming a manager or somebody faster. If you look at it positively, that's what it is. I can't think of a negative way of anybody doing that. Maybe Imani and Niroza can add as well. The person who asked the question maybe and come on screen or type and say, what is the objective of that, doing that, being more critical? If it's not for the betterment of that person, is it to put them down or is it to bring them up? What is that?
Let's hypothetically say that it's to put them down. And if you are feeling that it's purely because of biases or ego or jealousy, or yes, we don't have those, but we have to address the fact that it could be there, and there could be females who are facing that with female bosses around. So if they are in that situation, and if they know that it has nothing to do with their performance, how can they steer through it? What sort of advice can you give if they are in a situation? Because whether or not it should happen or not is up. Of course, it's debatable, and we all agree that it shouldn't happen. And I personally don't believe it happens. But if there is somebody in that situation, can we give them some tips as to how to handle it?
Yeah, so if you are aware of your boss's behavior, I think you have one up on that, right? So if you know the person is going to be absolutely critical, proactively show the work way before, right? If you know your boss and if you have mentally figured the person out, you know that the reaction is very typical. So you can wait, drive the conversation in a way that you are ready for the next session of the person being more critical. You'll possibly know, okay, next question is going to be on this, next question is going to be on this. I have all my, Badu list ready to show the work that I've done. So that's possibly the only reverse reaction you can have. Because you psychoanalyze your boss and be ready with, whatever you need to be ready with for that kind of behavior.
That's interesting.
Yeah, I would agree with that in terms of like, because it is understanding your boss irrespective of the gender. And I mean, you could have someone who is really critical about what you do and be a male boss as well. So it's knowing who you are dealing with. And I tend to wonder why they've called it a queen bee syndrome, because the queen bee is practically the person who does nothing in that in the beehive, right? So I really don't get that logic at all.
Probably why they try to put others down.
So I mean, anyway, but I do agree with Pulasthika in terms of like, if it is that, and that is the sort of the agenda behind it, then it is understanding that person and knowing that that is what's going to happen. So you've been two steps ahead, and you really, planning things out, and and seeing how long it sustains also. If it is something that really doesn't change in a long period of time, then there's nothing keeping you there as well. If you have done everything you can do to, mitigate the situation and all, you also can, and see if this is something that you want to be part of, because you can't change everyone, but you can change the equation of either you being in that team or not, moving on. So I think that's also something that you can look at. So it's irrespective of gender, it's also understanding the individual.
Just to add there, it could be a misunderstanding also, Zafrana. Like it's very highly unlikely that there's jealousy, or if there is jealousy, obviously the person, not the manager, the person reporting must be smarter than them, and then it could be a a threat that
Insecurity.
the insecurity felt, and it could be one reason. If that is the case, I'm sure there's ways for the subordinate to face it. If not, it could be a very clear misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of what is being told and what is being understood. I have faced a lot of situations where there's a lot of decoding issues in in Sri Lanka, of course, where it's not what you say is what is understood. They just understand what they like to hear. It's not what is being told. So there is a very big issue in communication. We need to have clear communication, clarity in what we speak, and before two parties, end the meeting or a discussion, I think we have to have a method of summarizing and making sure both parties understood what is being told and what is being understood. Because that's a very clear, issue I have faced in many situations. Not what I say is understood, Luckily, it comes back to me, and then, I had to clarify and have spend another equal time to, just make things clear. So I think this clear communication plays a vital role, and we need to have that, it's another subject
on its own
to have another session,
True.
on how to have clarity and clear communication, and very transparent way of dealing with your colleagues.
True, it's often
Just to add to that very quickly, I think even the communication coming in from whoever who is in the team, to say that this I didn't quite like the way it was said or how it was expressed. I have always found that when there is feedback like that, it is really helpful in every sense, and like even where you have where you've been open to telling someone that it wasn't you kind of either you misunderstood or you didn't you didn't really understand why they said it in that way. Because see, if feedback is wonderful in that sense, right? Because you need to really hear from someone to understand what you said might not have been received in the way you wanted it to be. So yeah, so just to add that.
It's a responsibility of both parties to understand what was said more than focusing on how it was said. I think that's where a lot of miscommunication also happened. So on the contrary,
and I think
yes,
there the maturity level also again
yes,
comes into play, what Niroza said, because you might sometimes expect you can't expect someone who's say junior to just come up and say something else. You also have to think, okay, was that the right thing to say? So if you even felt that it wasn't the right thing, going back and saying, hey, I'm sorry, that came out the wrong way, what I actually meant is a big step, and you need to do that, right? Because sometimes it doesn't come from that individual, but it makes a big difference if you can sort of do that, and I think anyone should.
true. Now on the contrary to that, there's also where people assume that female bosses support and mentor their female subordinates more, right? So let's say you're working under a female boss and you get merit based on your work, obviously, but the rest of the team thinks that it's because you're being favored. I think as we started also, Pulasthika mentioned it. It's not sometimes based on merit. Sometimes people think it's because of the gender. So when you're in a situation like that where you're under a female boss, you're getting merited because of your performance. The rest of the team, either they call you out or they say because you're a female, you're getting either the promotion or the merits. If you're in a situation like that, how can you tackle it? What should be their response to it? Just briefly, maybe we can have some answers.
Yeah, so I would say it's clear performance measuring methods. We have to have our very transparent methods of measuring performance and transparent methods of giving promotions and, contributing towards the performance. So one thing is like, okay, when you say favoring females, it's a equal gender understanding. Multitasking ability of females are much higher than males. So the same age, same level, if you give, same IQ level to employees, I have seen females are sometimes, in certain jobs, like for example, if you look at some data entry, very basic one, keying in is much faster and, females do better than a male, but both are doing the same job. So obviously the female tend to get promoted to the next level faster because she does a better job than the male. It's not anyone's fault. They are created that way. Females are created that way. So the male will think, I'm also doing the same thing. She's also doing the same thing, but she's getting promoted. But the person who's overlooking will see a different thing there. So if you have a very clear performance measuring base, if both know what is being looked at, what is being expected by the superior, obviously you have results, you have a fact sheet to argue when there is a question like that. So I have always survived with that sort of things where I have very clear, measuring methods, and it's very transparent. So everyone sees the same thing. I'll leave it to the other two to comment.
Imani, do you want to add into it if the measuring methods are not as transparent as it could be, and if somebody is in that situation, how could they?
And I think that it is a matter of getting those measuring the measurements transparent. That's what needs to be done, and it's not like thinking about the fact that because then you're not really analyzing the situation, right? You're just assuming that it is because of something to do with gender and because of that. But if it is a gaping hole that the measurements are not sort of smart, or it's not put down in a way that can be quantified, then you need to address that and say that, okay, can we look at it in this, and then make it an equal playing field in that sense. And then afterwards, look at the systems, right? So if you are in an organization, it will be unfortunate if you're in an organization that doesn't value meritocracy and looks at it in that sense, because then you have to really see whether that's something that you want to be in, because changing that may not really, sometimes the sort of where you are in the whole organization structure might not allow you to sometimes change certain things. Doesn't mean that you can't make an attempt, but do you sort of really work on it in that sense? So I would say that would be what you should need to sort of give your time and effort to, rather than fixating on the fact that this is because of a gender equation.
Interesting. Before I go into the next topic, there is a question specifically asked for Pulasthika. So let me just read it out. The others also can chip in if needed. What if the boss doesn't know? So this was based on our previous conversation. What if the boss doesn't know how to talk properly and humiliate you continuously, as his expectations are so high on performance? Don't you think we have the right to speak up? Many bosses get offended and keep grudges and probably take revenge. Is it worth standing up?
I think there's a lot of key words in that question, right? So he says, he or she says continuously humiliates, right? So for somebody to continuously do that, you will need to pick up why that is. It's not one off. It seems to be like a, either your performance is not great. All of you on this call can't be feeling that I'm the victim. Not really,
Sure.
right? The world is far more difficult than everybody feeling I'm the victim in your shoes. So you need to reflect and say, why continuously humiliate? And if it's in public, I think that's a management style possibly no one endorses anytime now. And the person also says expects high performance. So a manager expecting a high performance is not a bad thing. I think that is expected of a manager to do. So speaking up, you should try. So example, all of us, if this is happening to you as a person, however much you do not speak up, over a period of time, this incident will eat you inside. You will lose confidence. You will not be who you are because you're always suppressed. For whatever reason, right or wrong reason, you will feel that you're always suppressed. So the better thing for you to do is really take stock of what this is. If somebody is holding a grudge and taking revenge and humiliates you on a daily basis, why are you in this job, right? Because I'm sure it's not easy to find another job. You will have other commitments, but you really need to put out yourself a plan and figure out what you're going to do. Not that you're going to suddenly get up and walk away, but if you have done a very good objective assessment in terms of the terms that you have used on that question, in terms of continuously humiliates, if I speak up, holds a grudge and takes revenge, ask for high performance. If you evaluate all of that, and if you feel you're not getting the motivation, the guidance, the mentoring that you need to perform the job, but only humiliated shouting, you may not come out as a great professional because you're not getting the ingredients you need. But draw yourself a plan. If I was you, I would take the humiliation. I will take the, based on how important or how much you can endure this, and have myself a plan, 3 months, 6 months, 100-day plan, and move out of the role, because the role is not helping me in anything. It'll definitely eat you out.
Thank you, Pulasthika. I think that was a very comprehensive answer. Somebody could actually, consider following and better understand the situation, as, like you said, they've mentioned the words continuously. So they need to even assess and see if they are in the right place. So moving on to our next area. So women are generally expected to be the primary caretakers of their family, right? And sometimes prioritizing family over career could impact their work also. So this makes people think that women would be ineffective in leadership roles. Some even complain that some female bosses actually bring their homework also to office. So the question is, how can you manage both family and career? Any tips?
Yeah, so I think it's about, time management plays a key role here, because end of the day, it's about what is being done and not, right? So if you want to do everything, how do you manage your time? How do you plan out yourself? How do you actually, where do you want to get, and what do you have to do to get there? So it's about a proper planning and managing your surroundings better. So if you have a lot of things to do, you have to really understand what's important and what's not. And of course, you have to give priority to your career and family life equally. So there's a lot of tips, work-life balance. I think that's again a different subject, but it's about managing everything, everybody equally. So if you are having a problem at home, you can't carry that to work and create another problem at work. If you have a problem at work, you can't take it back home and create problem at home. So you need to really clearly differentiate the two areas and manage them independently while using both equally, So I think it's possible. All of us here have done it. So it's not, rocket science. It's just that, really engaging yourself very effectively in all areas. So if you're a working mother and if you don't have any help at home, how you start your day, what time do you start your day, how you organize everything, how do you manage, and then your communication with your office, your timings, how do you manage that? And a lot of organizations now look at all that, and there are a lot of flexi hours, facilities, creche for children. I think it's gone are the days where we have issues at office and you can't work, you can't balance. It's not that anymore. All these offices, the new world is different, and I think the present context, I think we can even do better with working from home. All the companies have learned how to work from home, how to get people to work from home. I think it's not a difficult thing anymore. I'll let Pulasthika and Imani add on this. I think, yeah.
Pulasthika, any tips on how someone can manage or balance rather both work and home?
Thinking. Um, honestly, I think there's so much of videos, right, on this topic. And I think Coca-Cola CEO is the one who possibly did the remarkable conversation on this.
On the juggling of the balls.
Correct. So my personal opinion is you can have it all, but not at the same time. Okay. That's what I'm very much about planning and very much about goal setting and very much about personal goal setting. Not that everything in life really works according to a plan. Every step of the way your plan changes, the environment changes, your decision changes, but you need a massive support group. Personally, for me, if I have ever done justice to all the important parts in my life, it's because of the support system I have. If I didn't have the support system, I would have made completely different career choices. So you can have it all, but not at the same time, I think. So if I wanted to be, a wife or a mother or, a great daughter or a great aunt to my nephew, all of that, if I had different plans and, different things, go and see my grandparents and take a year off or something, you can't, push it down. You'll have to decide, okay, I'm going to take this sacrifice for this compromise and move forward. So I don't think that you can do it all and that is expected. I think that's a really superficial target for anyone to have, from my experience. Have different experiences.
Imani, would you like to add in?
Yeah, and I think that the fact that when it is, I think what Pulasthika said about you have to know what is it that you works for you and what you want. And the other thing is, I think that whole thing of demarcating and thinking you can't bring something into a conversation because it's work related, you can't bring it home, or you need to sort of curtail it. I think you need to relook at that in a way, in terms of it's not just bringing it in all its sort of with all the challenges it has, but putting it out there, saying that it is stressing you out, or it is something that is making you worrying you or something at a certain point to your family, or even if it's a family situation and you feel that this is something that is really, stressing you out, having a conversation with your team or your boss or whoever it is, and telling them that, this is something that you are going through, is it really helps, because you can't really say, I can't talk about this here, or I can't talk about it there, because you are that one person, isn't it? So I think that is something that, it's just how we look at it, right? Because some of us just may not want to share. That's a different thing. But it's the other thing is you having that conversations. And I think we spoke about this earlier. It's about the type of relationship you have with your team and your boss and your family, etc., where you can have those conversations, and that will help. Because we have, through this 1.5, 2 years, we have understood how much things like mental well-being and all of that also matters, because it's about being able to have conversations, being able to express yourself, and know that everyone can go through times which are stressful, and they shouldn't be sort of judged based on it. It's just only natural. So I think, yeah, you have to have the sort of go forward and talk about it as well, to irrespective of where it is that you talk about it. Yeah,
I completely agree with yes, Niroza.
Yeah, just to add a bit more, there's a bit of patience needed here. A lot of employees I've seen, they become very impatient the moment they have a problem in hand. They don't see the solution. They don't like to see the end of the solution and take a judgment. They are very judgmental with the problem in hand, and they think that the problem is going to last forever. It shouldn't be the case. You must look at solutions like what Imani said, the discussion, the dialogue with your superiors, your subordinates, your colleagues to solve the problem is very important, because you can't just come into a conclusion that this is a problem and I'm not going to come out of it and, oh, this is the end of my career. That's not the case. You need to have that right dialogue with the right people. Of course, the right people. Okay, I'm stressing on the word right people, because there are some people who don't give the right solutions or advice. You go to the wrong person, get the wrong advice, and you take wrong decisions in life, and then you end up, as a loser in life. So I think it's very important whom you choose to get your advice, and whom you choose to, reach out for help. It's very important you pick the right person in your life for those kind of important things. So I think that's an area that, they have to really pay attention.
So even when it comes to work-life balance, like what we were discussing, yes, I agree with all of you. One is, like Pulasthika said, I'm just summarizing for everyone's benefit and with the interest of time. So it's all about having your priorities right. Like Pulasthika said, you can't, have everything, at always. So it's about having our priorities right. Like Niroza said, time management is key. Like Imani said, pick your right support system. And that's one of the key. We had a question also, males seem to have more time, but female, we always have to handle the housework also. But I think it's not that hard if we can manage a time better. It's not that we have to do everything by ourselves. It's okay to reach out for help, build a support system around you. And I think it will be not such of a daunting task to really manage it. If you know your priorities right, I think you should be able to steer through that very well. So I'm just taking the last question before we go to the closing remarks. So we have an interesting question about, if a male colleague is harassing a female subordinate of yours, how would you handle it? Pulasthika, may I start that with you? And also, this is a very common question, so I'll just put in something else also. It's not just being like a subordinate harassing, but even if you go out as a team and being the boss, to what extent as a boss do you have to go to protect or stand up for your female subordinates? So in this case, it's about harassing.
Yeah, so on the question, if it says a male colleague of mine harasses a
Your
female
subordinate.
my director. Yeah, if I'm aware of it, I think the answer is clear, right? Whichever gender, whichever composition, I think no harassment. I think that's an absolute no-no. But we have to be aware of it. The difference is sometimes we don't pick the signals. And, you know, harassment is such a taboo and stigmatized conversation. Sometimes we don't pick it up. But if I'm definitely aware, I think possibly there is no, we will go to the extent possible to, you know, send the person home. And I'm not shy to say this. But it has to be brought to notice. People have to be comfortable to come and say this is happening, etc. So that's on that one. In terms of when we go out and, you know, we spend a lot of our time at work, right? Other than from home. Now, home, of course, working from home, I think possibly more or less the same thing. But previously, maybe 18 months ago, or everyone, when you interns come in, graduates come in, new hires come in, inductions, we speak to all our employees. And afterwards, on all our surveys, what employees say is our second home is work. And we have a lot of onus in terms of respecting that statement, in terms of the safety, the comfort, the environment that you expect or naturally given to you at home is extended to workplace. So there is no boundary in terms of we've personally gone to courts for employees' personal, you know, hearings. We have gone to, you know, family disputes, rightly or wrongly, we have gone into fix. Different times of everybody's life, when it's celebration, harassment, difficulty, I think we as colleagues, irrespective of relationships, have definitely dived in to solve and for a better outcome. So in terms of the harassment, I think there is no way that nobody tolerates harassment, bullying, all of that. This cannot be tolerated. And if it happens to anyone in my team, definitely I will make sure it, you know, to the extent possible that we will address it.
Thank you, Pulasthika. Imani, I'm going to point a different question at you. So we have a question: as all panelists are female bosses, what are your views on making a conscious effort to look better than the rest of the female colleagues? Do you think it's important to dress better? Just a quick note for all the people who have joined today's webinar. We do have a webinar coming up down 2-3 months, hosted by Sitari, about dressing for success in workplace. So we will get into detail on that. But I would like if you could swiftly answer to that question. Do you think it's important to dress better?
Well, rather than dressing better, I think you obviously dress to the occasion, right? In terms of you are going to work, you don't come in your PJs because I mean, okay, these days we might be wearing our PJs at the bottom of our t-shirts, but what I mean is, like, you know, you dress up for the occasion, right? So in that sense, you would want to bring that into what you bring into coming into work, because that adds a little more in terms of, you know, you feeling good about yourself, right? So it is not in comparison to someone else, but in terms of what makes you feel better. And I think that is what you need to look at it, rather than, okay, dressing better than someone else, because what suits someone might not suit you. But what makes you feel good coming into this discussion, coming into a meeting, coming into some forum, do that. And by all means, because I think that is something you do for yourself, not anyone else.
Thank you, Imani. With the interest of time, I think I'd like to move into our final thoughts about our topic today. So overall, in summary, working under a female boss, is it really different for a female who is working under a female boss? What are your final thoughts today? Shall we start with Niroza and then go to Imani and end with Pulasthika?
Yes. Once again, Zafrana, thanks for inviting me for this interesting, session. I think me personally, even though I've been a female boss, I think there's not much of a difference. End of the day, there's nothing different to man and a woman. It's a company. End of the day, company belongs to everybody equally, and I think it is everyone deserves equal treatment. And all of us are human beings, and all our wants and needs are same immaterial of, our gender. So I think from female side of it, I think we should not feel shy to talk. We should not feel bad to ask what we want. It's about, us being not pointing the right question at the right time, or not standing. I'm not saying that, you have to go and fight for your rights or nothing like that, but your gender is not an issue for you to raise the right question or the right concern at the right time. Be free, so be it. If the other gender is taking it differently, don't take it serious. You be yourself. I think that's what I have to tell everyone. It doesn't matter whether you're a male or a female. It's just that you be yourself, be free, express yourself, and be what you are. And that's all basically. I don't think it's an issue of being a man or a woman.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Niroza. Thank you, Niroza. Imani?
Yeah, so I think it's a lot to do with self-awareness. It's not to do with gender, but it's about understanding yourself to lead others, right? So it's about understanding self and then understanding others and then leading better. So I would say, for me, it boils down to that. It is not about a gender, but about everything that we spoken about, which makes it what it is in terms of leading a team and understanding what makes it work. Yeah.
Thank you, Imani. Pulasthika?
Yeah, so I think all of us are saying is that individuals are different, right? So you'll possibly need to do your homework. All of you would have heard about a concept called glass ceiling. But if you really look at, the advancement of that, now you have, not now, you possibly had it for the past 10 years, a theory called glass cliff, which means that you're highly likely to be hired as a female to do a job when a business is plummeting, right? So the IMF president, or there's so many, leaders, even in Sri Lanka, there's so many female leaders who have been selected for the behavioral and the personality traits that you have when a business is sinking to come and revive it. So it's not, where your gender has always pluses and minuses. So it's not a bad thing. Then on the global front, I currently belong to a global organization. So I've always in this company have had a female boss versus a local female boss. If I have a personal medical reason, my local female boss, when I say I want to take some time off, there's a limit, an amount of probing that is done in terms of, it could come as part of caring as well. Why are you okay? Are you managing home and all of that? My global female bosses, when I say I need from this day to this day time off for this reason, which is medical, I won't give any, personal reasons. That's all they want to hear. Okay, so there is a very local version, very regional version, very global version. Not that my current supervisor who's in a different country, different ethnicity, doesn't really understand or care about me. Possibly they care more about me, but cultural differences are there. We don't get into people's personal business. Our relationships are different. So even in this conversation, there is a lot of ways to look at this conversation in a positive angle. I think the takeaway for everyone who I think dialed in or took the time to dial in is possibly that. But going forward, considering we have come so far in the gender agenda, you will have a lot of bosses or colleagues or somebody who have to influence to get their job done, who is not only defined by their gender. They'll be definitely defined by their education, religion, sexual orientation, so many different things. So you might have a combination of, female boss, Buddhist, lesbian, right? So now how do you manage that combination versus only female, right? Now you will have somebody who says, I don't want to identify myself as, male or female, I'm very binary. But has these things, not a mother, so many combinations, right? So I think what is a takeaway for everybody, including us, is that we don't size people up in one little title or a label that we have. our relationships are far more bigger in terms of the personalities. I think that's possibly maybe a broader conversation to have.
Thank you so much, Pulasthika, and also Niroza, Imani. Thank you so much for gracing our panel today. We truly appreciate your presence. Like all of the panelists said, we all need to understand that irrespective of one's gender, good and bad bosses could be anyone. Hence, we all need to shift our focus from gender to actual work. So don't challenge or question your boss's abilities, especially because she's a female boss. And finally, instead of feeling victimized, we must focus our efforts to ascend our leadership purpose, no matter what our pace is. Do join us at Working Women's Roundtable and join the LinkedIn group to learn and to support each other throughout our careers. Membership and admission to all webinars and materials are completely free of charge. And if you still have more questions to ask from the panelists, please feel free to write to us on wwr@luminarylearningsolutions.com or join in our LinkedIn group. And let's continue the conversation over there as we share the learnings of today's webinar. So once again, thank you so much, Niroza, Imani, and Pulasthika for being a wonderful panelist and for that interesting conversation we had today. Next month, on the 18th August, we have our next forum on physical well-being for women. And that will be moderated by our very own Safranwa. You will get the registration link to your email by tomorrow. Until then, thank you for being a part of this forum. Stay safe, stay productive, and good night.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye.